Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The ancient ruins were hidden deep within the forest, a place where even the bravest travelers dared not venture. Dense trees tangled overhead, their branches intertwined as if they conspired to keep the world's secrets locked away beneath their thick canopy. Somewhere below this ancient growth, a team of archaeologists had set up camp, and their leader, Dr. Elara Quinn, knew they were close to something extraordinary. Elara crouched next to a stone slab covered in dirt and moss, carefully brushing away the layers of time with the patience of someone who had spent her life chasing the echoes of forgotten civilizations. Her heart raced. For years, she had studied the ancient scripts, the hints buried in folklore and half-remembered songs that spoke of powerful magic long lost to humanity. And now, in this clearing, she could feel the weight of history pressing down on her. Jared, her assistant, crouched beside her, his face flushed with the excitement of discovery. "This could be it, Elara," he whispered, his breath misting in the cool air. "This could be the rune stone." Elara nodded, too focused on her task to speak. Her fingers trembled as she brushed away the last of the dirt. Beneath the grime, the stone glowed faintly, its surface etched with cryptic symbols that shimmered in the fading light of the afternoon. She leaned closer, her eyes scanning the patterns. It was broken, a jagged crack running through its center, but even in its damaged state, the rune radiated power. "This is it," she murmured, finally allowing herself to believe it. "We've found it." The stone was said to be part of an ancient relic that could awaken magic long forgotten. Legends claimed that it had the power to bend reality, to control the elements, and even to alter the very fabric of time. But those same legends warned of its dangers, and Elara knew that anything with that much power would not go unnoticed for long. The air around them seemed to hum, and for a moment, Elara thought she heard a voice, a whisper in a language she couldn't quite understand. She glanced around, half expecting to see someone lurking in the shadows, but the clearing was empty except for her team. "Let's get this documented," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "We need to study this before anyone else finds out." Jared nodded and began setting up the camera to record their discovery, while Elara continued to study the stone. The runes were familiar, but not entirely. She had seen similar patterns in ancient texts, but these were more intricate, more complex. Whoever had created this stone had wielded a magic far beyond anything humans could comprehend. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the forest floor, Elara felt a sudden chill. Something wasn't right. She stood up, scanning the tree line, her heart pounding in her chest. They were being watched. "Jared," she said, her voice low, "we need to move fast. I don't think we're alone." Jared looked up from the camera, his eyes wide. "What do you mean?" Before she could answer, a figure emerged from the shadows. He was tall, draped in dark robes that seemed to swallow the light. His eyes glowed with an unnatural intensity, and his presence made the air grow cold. "I see you found the stone," the man said, his voice smooth and oily. "I've been searching for it for a long time." Elara's heart sank. She recognized him from the descriptions in the old texts. Malakar, a dark wizard who had spent centuries hunting down ancient relics, amassing power that most could only dream of. His name was whispered in fear among those who still believed in magic, and now he stood before her, his gaze fixed on the rune stone. "You can't have it," Elara said, stepping in front of the stone, though she knew it was a futile gesture. She was an archaeologist, not a warrior. Her knowledge was in books and artifacts, not in fighting dark wizards. Malakar's lips curled into a smile. "Oh, I think you'll find that I can." With a flick of his wrist, a pulse of dark energy surged toward Alara, but before it could reach her, the rune stone flared to life. A barrier of shimmering light sprang up around it, deflecting Malakar's attack and sending a ripple of energy through the air. Alara stumbled back, her mind racing. The stone had reacted to the attack. It was still powerful, even in its broken state. If she could figure out how to restore it, they might have a chance. Jared scrambled to her side, his face pale. "What do we do?" "We need to get the stone out of here," Alara said, her voice shaking. "We can't let him get his hands on it." But even as she spoke, she knew it wouldn't be that simple. Malakar wouldn't let them leave without a fight. More figures emerged from the trees, dark sorcerers, their eyes glowing with the same malevolent light as their masters. Alara's team was outnumbered and outmatched. They had no weapons, no magic, and no way to defend themselves, unless Alara's gaze fell on the rune stone. The ancient texts had spoken of a way to restore its power, a ritual that could awaken the magic within. But the ritual required a sacrifice. She didn't have time to think. "Jared, help me with the stone," she said, her voice urgent. "We need to get it to the ruins." "The ruins? Are you crazy? We'll be trapped in there. We'll be dead if we stay here," she snapped. "Now move." Together, they lifted the heavy stone, its surface pulsing with a faint light as if it recognized the danger. The rest of the team followed, their faces grim but determined. They had come too far to give up now. The ruins loomed ahead, a crumbling fortress of stone and moss, long abandoned by whatever civilization had once called it home. As they approached, the air grew thicker, charged with the same energy that radiated from the rune stone. Alara could feel it pulsing through her veins, a rhythm that matched the frantic beating of her heart. They ducked inside the ruins, the dark sorcerers close on their heels. Malakar's laughter echoed through the trees, a chilling sound that sent shivers down Alara's spine. "You can't hide from me," he called after them. "The stone belongs to me." Inside the ruins, Alara's team set the stone down in the center of a large, circular chamber. The walls were covered in ancient carvings, their meanings lost to time, but Alara recognized some of the symbols. They matched the runes on the stone. "This is it," she whispered, her breath catching in her throat. "This is where the stone was created." Jared knelt beside her, his eyes wide with fear and awe. "What do we do now?" Alara swallowed hard. She knew what needed to be done, but the thought of it terrified her. The ritual required a sacrifice, someone to channel the ancient magic and restore the stone's power. But the cost would be high, too high. "We have to perform the ritual," she said, her voice barely audible. Jared stared at her in disbelief. "You're talking about magic that hasn't been used in centuries. How do we even know it will work?" "We don't," Alara admitted. "But it's our only chance." Malakar's forces were closing in, their dark magic seeping through the walls of the ruins. Alara could feel the pressure building, like a storm on the verge of breaking. They didn't have much time. Taking a deep breath, she began to recite the ancient incantation she had studied for years, her voice trembling but steady. The runes on the stone glowed brighter with each word, their light filling the chamber with an ethereal glow. As she chanted, Jared placed his hand on the stone, his face set with determination. He was willing to risk everything to save the world from the dark magic that threatened to consume it. The chamber trembled, the air crackling with energy as the stone began to hum with power. But something was wrong. The ritual wasn't working as it should. The stone was incomplete, its power fractured by the centuries of neglect. Alara's heart raced. They needed more time, but Malakar wasn't going to give them that luxury. Suddenly, one of the archaeologists, Celine, stepped forward. She had been quiet throughout the journey, a scholar more comfortable in the archives than in the field. But now, she looked at Allure with a calm resolve. "I'll do it," Celine said, her voice steady. "I'll finish the ritual." Allure's stomach twisted. "Celine, no. You don't know what will happen." "I do," Celine replied, her eyes sad but determined. "The stone needs a sacrifice, and I'm willing to make it." Before Allure could stop her, Celine stepped into the circle of runes, her hands raised as she began to chant the final words of the ritual. The stone flared to life, its light blinding as the ancient magic surged through the air. Malachar burst into the chamber, his face twisted in rage. "No!" he screamed, hurling a bolt of dark energy at Celine, but it was too late. The ritual was complete. With a deafening roar, the stone released its power, a shockwave of light and energy that tore through the chamber, disintegrating Malachar's magic and forcing him and his sorcerers to retreat. The dark wizard's scream echoed through the ruins as he vanished into the shadows, his plans shattered, the light from the stone faded, and the chamber grew still. Celine collapsed to the ground, her body limp and lifeless. The sacrifice had been made. Allure knelt beside her, tears streaming down her face. Celine had given her life to restore the rune, to protect the world from the darkness that had threatened to consume it. The stone now pulsed with a steady, gentle light, its power restored. As they left the ruins, the weight of their loss heavy on their hearts, Allure couldn't help but feel a sense of awe. They had uncovered something far greater than they had ever imagined, an ancient power that could protect the world from the forces of darkness. And though they had paid a heavy price, they had saved countless lives in the process. The rune stone stood tall behind them, its light a beacon of hope in a world filled with danger. Allure knew that their journey wasn't over, there were more secrets to uncover, more ancient magic to protect. But for now, they had done what needed to be done. As the sun rose over the horizon, casting the forest in a golden glow, Allure and her team walked away from the ruins, their spirits both heavy and hopeful. They had become the guardians of a forgotten magic, and they would carry that responsibility with them for the rest of their lives. The sun's first rays cut through the forest, illuminating the path ahead of them. Allure led the team silently, her mind swirling with the events of the past hours. The weight of Celine's sacrifice pressed down on her heart, a heavy reminder that they hadn't just uncovered a piece of history, they had unleashed something far greater than they ever could have anticipated. Jared walked beside her, his face etched with exhaustion. Neither of them spoke, but the quiet between them wasn't awkward. It was the silence of shared grief and mutual understanding. The others followed in a somber procession, their eyes fixed on the path ahead but their minds likely still back in the ruins. With the stone that now held the fate of the world in its runes, the team emerged from the forest into the open fields where their vehicles waited. The journey back to civilization felt unreal, as if the world they were returning to had no idea what had transpired in the ancient ruins. The distant city, with its bustling streets and towering buildings, suddenly seemed insignificant. How could it matter, after everything they had witnessed? Allure placed a hand on the worn surface of the transport vehicle, her fingers tracing the cold metal as she glanced one last time at the dark line of trees. The rune stone was hidden now, protected by the barrier they had restored. But she couldn't shake the feeling that it wasn't over. "Not by a long shot." "We did what we had to," Jared said, his voice barely above a whisper. Celine, she knew what was at stake. Allure nodded but didn't respond. It didn't make it any easier. How could it? They had saved the world, but at what cost? The drive back to the research facility was a blur of winding roads and distant thoughts. Elara rested her head against the cool window, watching the passing trees, her mind replaying every moment of the last few days. She had always dreamed of uncovering something incredible, something that would change the way people understood magic and history. But she had never expected it to be this dangerous, this real. As the vehicle approached the city outskirts, Elara felt a subtle shift in the air, as if the world was waiting for something to happen. She couldn't help but wonder if Malachar would return. He had disappeared, yes, but that didn't mean he was gone forever. Dark magic had a way of lingering, festering in the shadows until the right moment to strike. The research facility loomed ahead, a cold, gray building that felt far too mundane for the extraordinary events they had just survived. Elara and the team stepped out, each person weighed down by their own thoughts as they walked through the glass doors. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as they made their way to the lab where they would begin the process of cataloging their findings. As Elara entered the room, the familiar hum of computers and the soft clinking of equipment provided a small comfort. It felt normal, like the world hadn't changed. But it had. She sat at her desk, pulling out her notes and placing them next to the small fragments of rune inscriptions they had taken from the site. The glowing stone, the powerful barrier, the ancient language, everything they had discovered had pointed to a magic beyond anything humanity had encountered in centuries. And now, that magic had been unleashed. Elara, Jared's voice pulled her out of her thoughts. He stood in the doorway, holding a small tablet, his expression serious. "We've intercepted a transmission. You might want to hear this." Elara followed him to the comms room, where a recorded message played across the screen. The voice was cold, calculating, and unmistakable. "I know you have the stone," Malachar's voice echoed through the speakers, sending a chill down her spine. "You think you've won, but this is far from over. The magic you've restored belongs to the old world, one that I intend to claim." Elara's stomach twisted. She had expected this, hadn't she? She knew Malachar wouldn't simply vanish, but hearing his voice again, so soon, made her blood run cold. "Destroy the stone if you wish, but it will do you no good. The barrier you've restored won't last forever. When it falls, I will be waiting." The transmission cut out, leaving an ominous silence in its wake. Elara stared at the screen, her mind racing. If Malachar was right, and she had no reason to doubt he was, then their victory had been temporary. The barrier they had created was only a bandage on a wound far deeper than they had imagined. "What now?" Jared asked, his voice low. Elara didn't have an answer. Destroying the rune stone wasn't an option. Its power was too great, too vital to the protection of the world. But leaving it in place meant risking Malachar's return. "We have to find a way to strengthen the barrier," she said finally, her voice steady even though she didn't feel it. "We can't let him break through. If he gets control of the rune's magic, there's no telling what he'll do." Jared nodded, his expression resolute. "We can start by analyzing the inscriptions we found in the ruins. Maybe there's something we missed, something that can help." Elara agreed, but even as they set to work, she couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. Malachar had already begun his next move, and the clock was ticking. Over the next few days, the team worked tirelessly, poring over the ancient texts, trying to decipher the hidden meanings in the symbols. Every fragment of rune, every piece of the stone's history, was studied and restudied, but nothing seemed to offer the solution they needed. As the hours stretched into days, Elara's exhaustion deepened. She hadn't slept in nearly 48 hours, her mind too preoccupied with the looming threat of Malachar. But every time she closed her eyes, all she could see was Celine's face, her body crumpling as the stone's magic surged through her. Was it worth it? Elara didn't know anymore. The rune stone had been restored, yes, but at such a cost. And now, with Malachar still out there, waiting for his chance, the sacrifice seemed hollow. Just as Elara was about to call it a night, the comms room erupted into chaos. Lights flashed red, alarms blared, and voices crackled over the speakers. "We've got movement near the ruins," one of the security techs shouted. "Dark magic signatures, multiple sources." Elara's heart pounded in her chest. "It's Malachar," she said, already heading toward the door. "He's making his move." Jared grabbed his gear, following close behind her. "We can't let him breach the barrier. If he gets through, I know," Elara snapped, her mind racing with possibilities. There wasn't time to wait for backup. Malachar had returned with his sorcerers, and they had to stop him before he reached the stone. The drive to the ruins was tense, the air thick with the anticipation of what was to come. Elara's thoughts were a whirlwind of fear and determination. Malachar had been biding his time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Now, with the barrier weakened from the inside, he had found his opportunity. As they reached the clearing, the air was thick with magic. Elara could feel it pulsing through the ground, vibrating in her bones. The ruins stood ominous in the moonlight, the faint glow of the barrier flickering like a candle in the wind. Malachar stood at the edge of the forest, his dark robes billowing around him, his eyes locked on the stone. The sorcerers flanked him, their hands raised as they chanted in low, guttural voices. The barrier shuddered under the force of their magic. "You're too late," Malachar called out, his voice carrying over the clearing. "The barrier will fall, and the stone's power will be mine." Elara's heart raced. They couldn't let him win. Not after everything they had sacrificed. Without hesitation, she stepped forward, her voice steady as she called upon the knowledge she had spent her life studying. The ancient words of protection, the chants of the old world, spilled from her lips, and the runes carved into the earth glowed faintly in response. The barrier flared, but Malachar's power was too strong. The sorcerer's magic pushed against hers, pressing the barrier inward, bending it toward collapse. Jared stepped up beside her, his voice joining hers in the chant. Together, they poured everything they had into the barrier, fighting to hold it steady, but it wasn't enough. The barrier cracked, and the light dimmed. Malachar smiled, his hands raised in triumph, and then, from the shadows, a new voice joined the chant. Elara's breath caught in her throat as she turned to see the source, Celine. Or what remained of her spirit. Her form was faint, barely more than a wisp of light, but her voice was strong, and her presence was undeniable. Together, they chanted, their voices rising as one. The barrier surged, glowing brighter than before, and with a final push, Malachar's magic shattered against it. The sorcerers were thrown back, their spells disintegrating in the face of the ancient magic. Malachar screamed in fury as the barrier sealed itself, locking him out once and for all. The clearing fell silent. Elara collapsed to her knees, her chest heaving with exhaustion. Celine's spirit flickered for a moment before fading into the night. It was over, for now.